Welcome to the show, 713. We've got Mike Acosta on. Before we bring him on, we will go ahead and Wes Andrews and I are going to welcome everybody. How's everybody doing? Everybody having a good time, I hope, as they listen in. We've got a fun guest on, Mike Acosta, who's a Houston Astros historian, and he's got a lot of great stuff. Mike is the Gatekeeper of Houston Astros memorabilia team history. He's started in broadcasting with the Astros, and over the years, he's been in charge of authenticating and archiving every piece of Astros lore that comes off the field or from the dugout, for that matter. And Mike is an unrepentant Astrodome supporter, so we'll definitely ask him about that. And he's even created scale model of the dome, which has gone around Houston, and including a few preservation places. So without further ado, let's welcome Mike Acosta. How's it going, Mike?
Hey guys, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here, Mike.
Definitely. So I guess, just kind of introduce yourself a little bit. There's a lot of stuff to unpack there that we're definitely looking forward to talking to you about. But first off, welcome to the show here, 713.
I appreciate it. A little bit about myself, right?
Yeah,
I'm
right.
a native. I'm a native Houstonian. I grew up. I like to say I grew up in the Astrodome. I went to a lot of games. My dad took me to a lot of games. I was in the Astro Buddies Club from a young age until I aged out. That was kind of a sad moment when we couldn't do that anymore. My brother and I were in the Astro Buddies, but I've always been very interested in Houston history, Astros history. I love art. I love to draw. I love to paint. I like to make models. I've kind of surrounded myself with that type of genre, I guess, through whether it was school or work. And I've been really fortunate along the way. I spent 22 years. Really, I've only worked now
22.
3 places. Yeah, I've worked 3 places in my life, and I worked one place before I joined the Astros 22 years ago, 22 seasons ago. And so, you pick up a lot of stuff, and I guess it kind of formulates who you already were. It solidifies some things. It enhances, you learn a lot more. I mean, I'd like to think that we all do not stop educating ourselves in whatever it is in life that we try to pursue. And that's exactly the way I feel about my career so far and everything else.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it just you did such incredible work for the Astros, and so I know that you're in charge of the Hall of Fame in the Astros Hall of Fame now. Give us a little bit of an idea. What is it like because I could rattle off tons of players that maybe are worthy on the Astros side. How do you go about selecting, like you had Lance Berkman this year? For me, I would have put him in first, but I understand why you didn't and why you didn't. So what's your thought process on, the next class of Astros inductees for the Hall of Fame?
Sure. Well, we've had 2 classes. We had the 2020 class that we just inducted a couple of weeks ago at Minute Maid Park. Which was, like you said, Lance Berkman, Roy Oswalt, Roy Hoffines, Bob Watson, Cesar Cedeno, and Billy Wagner. And, all very well-deserving inductees. We weren't able to have an induction ceremony last year for obvious reasons because of everything that's been going on in the world. And we actually felt that, in a situation where there is a pandemic, and we could not have fans in the park, we were going to do a disservice to these people by inducting them and, putting the plaques up and, kind of privately presenting their jackets to them. It just wouldn't have been right. So we just decided to bump it to this year in 2021. But we've had 2 classes now. The first class in 2019 had 16 members. and
That's
that's
huge.
a pretty large class. And there
Yeah.
was, in kind of putting the Hall of Fame together, and if we're going to talk about the Astros Hall of Fame, we really need to start with Reed Ryan. Reed
Mhm.
Ryan was kind of the original driving force. He was the approver, so to speak, in kind of getting this together. I put the procedures, and I kind of I'd organized everything, and how the jackets were going to look, how the plaques were going to look, unique items, how it was going to appear, what the alleyway was going to look like, what we were going to put in there. But he was the guy who said yes and got the blessing of Jim Crane to really move forth with that. And I worked real close with him on procedures and putting together a Hall of Fame committee to where we could have a very good conversation and elect these Hall of Famers and really respect the history and the people. We're here to celebrate legacies.
Yeah.
And so in going into that first class, um, I looked at one thing that I told Reed we could not ignore, and that was our retired numbers.
Yeah.
I did a lot of research with other teams and what they had done for their team Hall of Fames, or if they had something of that nature, and a lot of teams do, and almost all teams have retired numbers. So I looked into the retired numbers, and I saw that the Astros were disproportionate in the numbers retired versus the numbers of people that were in the Hall of Fame that had their number retired. Usually, with other teams, I found that you are a National Baseball Hall of Fame person, and then you have your number retired. But all the teams kind of do it different, and we can't change. When you're in baseball or football or basketball, soccer, whatever it is, whatever pro sport it is, and if it's been around for many decades, you're simply a steward of that entity, that public trust, until you're not. And so, we try to do the best we can, and we respect the history. Now, in 1965, on the day that the Astrodome opened on April 9th, they retired Jim Umbright's number because he had passed away of cancer in 1964. And so that was the very first number that was retired. And it was, his story was shared throughout Houston. Umbright, his story kind of caught the hearts of Houstonians. And the teammates really loved him. He was a really great guy to have in the clubhouse, and they rallied around him, and they decided to retire his number. And the same thing in 1975 when Don Wilson passed away. He was a very big presence in the clubhouse, very well respected. The team was still fairly young. It was only about 13, 14 seasons in, almost 14 seasons in. And so they wanted to do something to honor him, and they decided to retire Don Wilson's number. And then, of course, later on, we had Mike Scott and Jose Cruz. They added Nolan Ryan to that.
Cruz.
And some of those guys, I mean, you really see how they were franchise, they impacted the franchise in their obvious ways. But altogether, including Jackie Robinson, we had, I think, like 11 retired numbers, and Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell at the time when I was doing the initial research, he hadn't gone into the Hall of Fame yet. And so
Right.
you're looking at Nolan Ryan and Craig Biggio at the time, and that was part of the discussion.
Mhm.
But we could not ignore the fact that these numbers were retired. We're not going to ever unretire numbers.
Yeah.
So we had to look at that. And then, so you look at the retired numbers, and that's kind of a really good class right there. Okay. But then you also look at what the team did, and I was kind of part of in 2012 when the franchise turned 50, and we started what was called a Walk of Fame right down Texas Avenue. And at
Oh,
that
nice.
time, we inducted some. Well, I say inducted. We presented these plaques, these bronze plaques that were in the sidewalk along Texas Avenue, and the idea was to continue these plaques down Texas, back around, the home plate side of the ballpark, and then up the first base and right field side, and eventually have this really nice trail of plaques that honor the past and all these great people. And it would have been, it was similar to a Hall of Fame in that it wasn't really limited to players. We could also have executives and broadcasters in there as well. So we started that, but then it kind of faded away and it really wasn't expanded. So when I started doing the research, And Reed and I started having some real detailed conversations. We talked about the Walk of Fame. We talked about the retired numbers, and basically came up with the idea. Look, these people have been recognized by the franchise already in the highest honor that they could. It would do them a disservice if they weren't part of the inaugural class of the Astros Hall of Fame. So
Sure.
that's where we came up with that. And it was a well-balanced class, a lot of great names in there. And it was also kind of looked upon as if we had started the Astros Hall of Fame years ago, this is kind of what it would have looked like by now. And so that's why you didn't see Lance Berkman or Roy Oswalt or Roy Hoffines right away, because they had not gone through that process. We were just trying to get the Hall of Fame off the ground and really start with a solid class that made some sense and have some meaning behind it. And I know a lot of people, they don't get that backstory. So I've tried to tell people, as much as possible and share that story of how we selected people, but that's how it came about. And it's done very well. The alumni love it, and it's been a lot of fun. Yeah. And I look forward to continuing, really kind of directing this down the line and doing some different things with it. And, we're just in the early stages now, but we have a good vehicle to take off in.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's why I asked, because I feel like if there's a lot of fans out there that might have wondered, hey, why was the class like that? And just shedding some light, who better to ask than you? And it's beautiful. Every time I visit the ballpark now, I walk by, down the alley, and it just, I didn't even watch 90% of them play really, but I love history, and especially Astros history. And you're so detailed and everything about it that you do for each person that's been inducted so far. It's an awesome thing. And I tell, anybody I know that's like, hey, I'm going to Houston, or at least pre-COVID, hey, I'm going to Houston, I'm going to go to Astros game, especially since you guys have opened the Hall of Fame. Hey, just go check out the Hall of Fame. You get to see a lot of cool uniforms on display for sure. But you get to see why I love this team and the identity that we have. And you do a really great job in capturing that. And but yeah, I've always wondered, how did that first class really come to be? And it was huge. There are sometimes in the National Baseball Hall of Fame, as no one goes in. So to see 16, I was like, whoa, that's massive. And but
no doubt.
It was awesome. And thanks for clarifying, because I've been wondering for years.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on something that really I think about a lot when we're working on the Hall of Fame. And you said, you didn't see 90% or whatever it was. You didn't see the majority of them play. And, that's part of the idea is that we are going to educate generations, make people who remember seeing Jimmy Wynn make a catch, or Joe Morgan turn a double play, or Larry Durker, win 20 games. We're going to make those people relive those great memories. But then we're going to educate all of the other generations who really didn't know. And, they're going to see their name. They're going to see the words on a plaque. They're going to know that they're all part, even though, uniforms change over the years, they're going to be part of this baseball fraternity here in Houston. Yeah. And so it's important. That was a huge thing, is educating future generations for players. I mean, at one point, it's weird to think, but you have to think down the line. You always have to project out into the future. At one point, we're going to have people coming to the ballpark, whether it's at Minute Maid Park or another stadium, who didn't see Jose Altuve play.
Yeah.
And that sounds weird right now, but it also it sounded weird, when Jose Cruz was playing for the Astros, or Mike Scott was pitching, and now we're 30-something years removed from retirement on there. And so the franchise has grown. I think for a long time the Astros were regarded still as a young franchise, but next year is the 60th anniversary of the team. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of history to celebrate. And there's a lot more history to continue to celebrate.
Yeah, definitely. We make history every year going to the playoffs.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And you were saying some people don't always agree with it, but it wouldn't be sports, right? If somebody didn't have a beef with something. So, no, I think you guys are doing a great job with it, and definitely look forward to checking it out next time I'm there. as well, which I guess you have a new class you were saying is going to be elected for 2022.
Yes, we are getting ready to meet. The Astros Hall of Fame committee is getting ready to meet. We're targeting September. That's usually when we have kind of a timeline within the franchise to get things done and prepared for the next season. And the last time we selected a class was in September of 2019, and that was the class we just inducted for 2020. So we're going to get together, and the class, the committee is a group that I'm really proud of because when we were putting together the Hall of Fame committee, I really wanted a good mixture of people that had really strong knowledge of the franchise, who were well versed on the players, well versed on Houston baseball history, also having knowledge of Houston history as well, not just Houston baseball history, but how the culture has evolved and how Houston has evolved as a city. I think that kind of plays into it as well, and what some of these players meant to the city, and not just as baseball players as well.
Right.
So we have, we have Bob Durrell, who is the president of the Larry Durker chapter of SABR, which is the Society for American Baseball Research,
Yeah.
and he's the head of that here in Houston, which is a national organization, and they have a chapter named after Larry Durker here. Mike Vance, who is a very well-spoken historian and author who has put together numerous projects about baseball and Houston in general. We have Craig Biggio. Larry Durker is on
Nice.
that. We have
Nice.
Gene
Powerhouse.
Dias, who is we have a very good selection. Gene Dias, who is a vice president of communications for the Astros. Marion Harper, who is the vice president of foundation development for the Astros. And then we also have Brian McTaggart, who covers the Astros on a daily basis, and also Allison Footer, who covers the Astros as well. She's an MLB correspondent, but she also spent many years working for the Astros as well. And I don't believe I left anybody out. I really hope I didn't. There's a good group there. And Reed Ryan was on that, but he has now gone a different path, and so he's not really part of that. But he and I talk, and I'm always gracious to his time that he gave to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and Reed's such a nice guy. Yeah,
we're looking to meet, next month and really kind of hammer out what the 2022 class is going to look like. I think it's going to be a smaller class than what we saw this year. I think we're kind of getting into a realm where, we don't have so many shoe-ins, or obvious people that we need to put in there, like the Lance Berkmans and the Roy Oswalts of the world. So we're going to start getting a lot more finite, but there are some people who I think that to most Astros fans will probably come to mind, and all of those guys are going to be certainly discussed. And that's the beauty of the committee, is that they can enter a room and really have a great discussion and really a solid discussion without all the, you see online where people banter around and everything, and then, a lot of time is wasted. This group can really walk in there, analyze the roster that I put out in front of them, and kind of taking a look at what their stats are, and really have a conversation as to what they meant to the Houston Astros or the Colt 45s, if it happens to be somebody there.
Oh, man, yeah, that's deep.
It does have, the Hall of Fame has a rule that you had to have played in part of at least 3 seasons. So it is possible, because the Colt 45s were around for 3 years. If you played, that's somebody who only played for the Colt 45s, which is the same franchise as what we have now. It is possible for somebody to be inducted as well, if that comes up.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, in 3 years, that definitely opens up the possibilities, of maybe a short-term person that had a huge impact in a short contract or a few years, and then went off to greener pastures or whatever. So well, I'm looking forward to the next class, and that was my big thing, was like, okay, like you said, it's getting a little more finite. Like, you're going to have to get down in the weeds now, because there's not as many obvious cases. to be inducted?
Yeah, we have a lot of great names and still a lot of great players that we have. I did a projection, so I kind of see what the Hall of Fame is going to look like for a decade or more, and
Right.
kind of project out what after the 2019 class, and I kind of looked at, all right, this is what 20 or 21 and so forth, up and through the greater part of this decade that's coming up, through the year 2029, as we get closer to 2030, you're still going to see a lot of great names.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of great players out there, and then also the people who impacted the franchise. Like we had Roy Hawthines in there this past year, and we had Milo Hamilton and Gene Elston in 2019. So we had non-uniform personnel in there, and there's a lot of other people that are going to deserve conversation, like Tal Smith and
Yeah.
Ari Bob Smith and Craig Cullinan, George Kirksey. There's a lot of people that have been involved with the franchise. I think at one point we'll probably be discussing Willie Berry as well. Who has been on the grounds crew since like 1970, and
Yeah.
he's one of the guys that
Right.
that used to dress up in the astronaut suit, at the dome,
Oh,
and he
nice.
dates back to those days, and he's
Yeah.
still there, manicuring the pitcher's mound and taking care of the field. So, that's what I really like about the Hall of Fame, is that it does honor the players, and we try to treat the legacy right and try to educate everybody in here now and in the future. But we also take a focus on the people who had a great impact off of the field as
Right.
well. So that's
Yeah.
a great thing.
And it captures the spirit of our team and of our franchise, like you said. Like, there's no better way to capture all that by putting these people that aren't just players. It's easy to see the players, but it's the people off the field and the people that have made a difference, in other aspects that help the success off the field, whether it be coach or GM or
Hmm.
announcer, things like that. It does open up a lot of good possibilities for some really great people that deserve to be recognized.
Hmm. Sure does.
Awesome. Yeah, you kind of mentioned the Astrodome. Um, that's definitely something that sits out there a lot. A lot of stuff has happened in regards to the Astrodome.
What's the Astrodome?
So, what was the first time? Do you remember the first time you walked into the Astrodome?
I have images. It was in the late 70s. Like I mentioned, my dad, took me to a lot of the games. He took my brother and I to a lot of games, and they were, I remember as a young kid, most of the time we would, if you're a Houstonian, and most of the time we would go down South Main. We'd cut through the medical center because we didn't live on the outskirts of Houston. We actually lived within Loop 610 at that time. So we would actually sometimes just come down Main Street, down to South Main, through the medical center. And it seemed like, I mean, at least to me as a kid, it seemed like the traffic wasn't as bad as it is now.
Yeah.
And I remember passing by the oil, that was by Fannin, but we would come around and turn on the Kirby, and there's the dome, and all of a sudden it's big and open, and the dome is like the biggest thing out there, and the sun is kind of gleaming off of the roof panels, because it's late in the afternoon, and we would park. It was hot, by the time we walk up to the door, I'm kind of sweating, and sometimes as I got a little bit older, I would I would beg my parents to get us there before the gates open, because I wanted to spend as much time in the Astrodome as I could. But as a kid, and I mean like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I remember feeling the whoosh of air conditioning as
Oh,
the door would open. You could hear the ballpark organ music playing, and
that's
I
right.
could see the bright AstroTurf field. It was a bright green, and then
Yeah.
the halls were kind of dark, and there were these lamps, that were above you, and we would walk around a little bit. We'd go get some food, and we'd walk around to the gift shop and stuff. And I remember as we went towards the outfield, it would open up, because the upper level seats ended down to the baselines, and there was the massive scoreboard. And
Oh yeah.
that was really probably the first thing that locked me into the mystique and the wonder, of the Astrodome was the scoreboard and all the lights, and then the Chester charge and the animations that they did on there, the home run spectacular. Which you see this right here. I'm kind of pointing toward. See those three bulbs
Yeah,
right
the
there?
three
Well, that's
lights.
that's actually a part of the original home run spectacular
Oh
that used to
nice.
be in,
Yeah,
and it lights up. I don't really activate it anymore, but I love that I have it because that's one of the very first things that I remember about going to the games. And then, on the field. So this is the late '70s and around 1980, and so the Astros are actually starting to play better than they were in the mid '70s, and um, they have these orange hats and the rainbow uniforms, and there's just a cool factor about everything, and I couldn't really
yeah,
pinpoint it, but
yeah,
it felt really different because as I got a little bit older, and I was at home during the summer or whatever, and the Cubs would come on TV at 1 o'clock or whatever it was,
That's
and they're
right.
playing
Yeah.
at they're playing at Wrigley Field, and you have ivy, you have an outdoor stadium, grass on the field, these pinstripe, blue and red, white, and blue pinstripe type uniforms, and then I go to the Astro game that night, and it's so much different than what they're doing, and it's even different than what I was seeing on TBS with the Braves, and so that's my first memory, with it's just how different it was, and it sparked curiosity, to learn more about it. Like, why do we
Yeah.
have this dome
yeah,
here? Why was it here?
Yeah.
How did all this come together? So
Yeah. I
those are
just
really
remember the
my earliest
noise.
memories.
Yeah, I just remember the
Yeah,
noise, just how loud that place would get. It would just be
it was
unreal.
an and there was an echo in there too. When you would, it wasn't like I think there's an Astrodome sound. It wasn't like a deafening echo, but it was certainly a little bit different, and it was just really cool. I mean, it just had a really, when I went inside there, I kind of felt like I really was in a different world. And don't tell anybody, but when we used to sit in the field boxes, you had the vomitories. You would walk out, right? So you were kind of behind on the concourse. I remember, and I was really little, so forgive me. As we were walking past that, and there was a different tunnel to where you could see the field. Again, I was very small. I thought the Astrodome was so big that there were multiple baseball games going on inside there, like on different levels. And I remember, I
Wow.
mean, that
that's
wasn't
funny.
very for very long because my dad then said, no, 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 this is it's. But I was a little confused because it was so built. Her were moving the see something of how the
And to your
Yeah.
point, I mean, there was nothing like it back then. And I mean, my dad was born the year that the Astrodome was built or finished at least. And, but like, even as a kid, I didn't go to a game until 92, three, maybe
yeah
91 at the earliest. And it was exactly like you described it. It was just when I walked to my seat, it was totally different because even in the early 90s there was still no other domed or roofed stadiums. There was nothing else like
yeah
where we got to play. There was no other place really had astroturf like we had. It felt, like you said, very cool and different. Like we're very unique.
yeah
And that's also what kind of drew me in. Like when you said there was just something cool that you couldn't put your finger on it, that's exactly how I felt as a kid. It's so crazy to me that you described almost exactly how I felt. It was just like, I don't know why, but this is awesome. Like everything about it. And then, of course, when I was a little bit older, you changed the uniforms on me. But I was such a big fan of the orange and navy, and the
yeah
rainbow shoulders were always so awesome to me. And then they changed it, and then I kind of was like, well, actually, this is kind of cool too. And
yeah
so, it's as somebody who grew up at, about 10 years later, it was almost the exact same thing for me. I walked in the Astrodome, and it was almost like I was in the Bad News Bears. Like
yeah
I'd seen the movie, and I was like, Oh my gosh, it is like the movie,
That's right.
Yeah,
Let
yeah,
them play. Let
right?
them play.
yeah. Well,
So
it is
great
really
movie.
unique. It
Yeah,
is really unique. If you think about that time period that you're talking about, which is the early '90s, you really the only other baseball stadium that was domed at the time was the Sky Dome. The
mm,
Oh
Superdome.
wow,
Well, the
yeah.
King
yeah,
Dome. The King Dome was there,
Kingdom. Hmm.
but the King Dome and the Superdome, the Sky Dome, even though it was retractable, uh, they didn't have a roof that looked like the Astrodome that allowed
Yeah.
light to come in.
Hmm.
They had dark roofs, opaque, no skylights at all. Probably because of the lessons learned with the Astrodome, the glare that they had here. But it looked different from a lot of the other dome stadiums that were there. And then of course there were some football domes as well. Like where the Colts played and a couple other places that I'm not thinking of the name right away. But the dome has always been unique because it was the first, and I think it had some unique physical attributes that just carried through the decades that it served Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, there was a uniqueness that, like you said, it just didn't do baseball. It did football. The whole movable thing. It would do the
Movable
football and
stands, yeah,
soccer. Remember seeing Pele
yeah,
there? That was pretty
yeah. They
random.
had
But
I think the Houston Hurricanes was
yeah,
the name of the team that played there for a short time.
nice. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
So where's the Astrodome at? I guess in your heart, and then I guess where is it at in regards to what are the next steps of it? So I guess first thing, where's the Astrodome in your heart then?
Well, the Astrodome is always there. I kind of feel like I've kind of positioned myself as someone who has contributed to making people aware of the importance, not only to baseball history and what it brought, but also Houston history and what it means to the city and what it means as a symbol and also just the general creation of it. Where it was the first of its kind. It's kind of like the Eiffel Tower. I mean, at one point, the Astrodome was outdrawing the Eiffel Tower in tourist attractions. So
Oh
where
wow.
it stands today, through the effort of a lot of people and a real a long list of people that I can't go through right now, it has been preserved and it has been saved. And the bottom line is it is a state antiquities landmark, and that it got that designation back in 2017. And then we officially placed a Texas historic marker there in May of 2018. So you can see that right outside the West Gate, and you see the story of the Astrodome there. And that means that the Astrodome is protected from demolition because it is protected by the Texas Historical Commission. And any type of work, so if it's demolition work or renovation work or even just repainting some of the areas and such around it, anything that's going to not necessarily alter, but anything that's going to affect the appearance of the building has to be approved by the Texas Historical Commission. And the Astrodome Conservancy was set up a few years ago to work in conjunction with Harris County and the Texas Historical Commission and other groups who are trying to do things, who are trying to bring great ideas and kind of unite that and bring a new life to the Astrodome. Now, what is the status? Well, it's been very slow going. The Astrodome is probably the most misinformed subject that I've seen ever in my life, and I'm sure that there are
Right.
other things.
UFOs, it's right up there.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard things like, oh, we voted to tear it down in 2013, and that is not true because it was illegal to put demolition on the ballot. People were voting for a bond issue, and bond issues are very generic. And at the time, it was kind of publicly guessed that if the bond issue didn't pass, then the county would decide to tear down the building. But the Astrodome was also fully paid for. And I'm talking about you talk about the original cost of the Astrodome, which was about $36 million in the
36
'60s.
million, huh?
Yeah,
To build
$36
that?
million in the '60s.
Wow.
Yeah, And then in the 80s, for much of the decade of the 80s, there were numerous renovation projects that probably totaled a little over $100 million. And it updated the facility, new signage, new AstroTurf. They expanded the seats. They put a new sound system in, smaller scoreboard. They took out the old big home run spectacular in 1988 and
Oh
where they
yeah,
put the new
sad day
seats.
on that. Sad day.
Yeah, yeah, that was really something that personally I didn't like seeing. But the Astrodome had all this debt for many years, right? And the original bonds were going to be retired in 2004. But the Astros kind of bought that out when they were moving over to the new ballpark downtown, which became Minute Maid Park. But you still had this outstanding debt that the county had from the renovation work that they had done in the 1980s, and so that was all paid off by 2013. The dome, there was all this misconception that we were still paying for the Astrodome. It just wasn't true. That it was costing millions of dollars to operate or just to mothball every year, and that wasn't true. For insurance, the insurance policy. I'm not an expert on the insurance policy that goes on because I don't work for NRG Park, but I do know from well-connected friends that I have over there that the Astrodome is on a blanketed insurance policy for the whole complex. So it doesn't really have its own policy. It's there for NRG Park in general, and
Hmm.
whether or not the Astrodome is there, it's kind of the same policy for the whole, all that acreage of what encompasses NRG Park. So there's so much misinformation.
Yeah.
And there were also contract constraints with the county. Harris County had entered an exclusive 5-year contract with the Astrodome Redevelopment Corporation back several years ago, and they were trying to get financing. They wanted to turn the Astrodome into a hotel and some
Yeah, I
other
remember that.
entertainment facility. Yeah, but because the county had signed this contract with the what was known as the ARC. uh, they really couldn't do anything else, and so they had to kind of wait it out, and then things kind of fall into limbo, and you have the other things, the misconceptions, and all this other stuff, and so here we are.
Yeah.
But really,
Yeah.
it just kind of stacks up. There again, so many things that people don't understand, but in essence, money is the end result, and how do we spend the money, and that all comes into what we make the building into, and how it benefits
Yeah.
the citizens of Harris County, and how it generates revenue for NRG Park, and how it's part of that system of facilities that's there. So that's something that the Astrodome Conservancy is taking a really good hard look at. There was a public engagement campaign that started out earlier this summer, the kind of bringing people in to kind of gauge the public opinion as to what they would like to see in the Astrodome. That had actually never been done before, even though a lot of media outlets had actually reported, oh, here we go again, they're soliciting ideas, and really that had not taken place. So from my standpoint, I've been working on the redesign of the Astrodome for many, many years, and I have put together a lot of conceptual models. I know that Roy Hoffines back in the early 60s, when they were trying to get the Astrodome built, that was part of the tools that he used were three-dimensional models to kind of show what the building would look like, how it would be laid out, and what it would do. And so that's kind of what I don't think that's really kind of changed. I think people like seeing a physical product that you can really kind of envision. It's one thing to see renderings or see a bullet point sheet, but I really wanted to show some things where this is what can be done. And so I've developed it over the years. I've done a very comprehensive outline of how every level is kind of laid out in the future, what the purpose is for every level, not just the layout, and then what kind of events can come back in the Astrodome. And I think in the end, while the Astrodome appearance, the physical appearance on the inside, has, under what I've done personally, changes drastically, although it still looks like the Astrodome. It's the spirit will still be there. I think people will in the future will still be amazed to walk in. I mean, if you look back in 2015 and in 2018 when we had these dome coming events and the county opened up
Dome
the
coming,
Astrodome,
nice.
yeah,
That's good.
and there were 25,000 people that came for each event and just kind of walked in. I mean, the amazement that, people had seen the inside, they hadn't looked up at that roof in years. And so it's still something that people look up and get. I was talking to a real good friend of mine many years ago, and he, this is back probably 7 or 8 years ago. And he straight up asked me, he's like, Mike, this is right after the election, the bond issue that happened a few months later. And he said, Mike, really, what would they do? I mean, seriously, I mean, look, the building, I mean, what would you do with a building where they don't need to play baseball anymore? And we were
Right.
walking inside for a project that we had. And I started to outline, and I said, this is at that point, I had all the concepts out. And we walked in, and by the time in about a minute span, and we walked down the tunnel, and he looked up at the roof, he said, I get it. He said, I get it. He said, now I understand. Being in here, seeing the roof and hearing you talk about what would go on in here and some of the interactivity that would take place and some of the attraction part of it and the dynamic architecture that would be in there and flexible architecture, he understood. He could see it coming to life. I mean, he couldn't see the end result, but he could see it coming to life. And I think that most people feel that way when they walk into the dome and look up. They kind of feel that this is not a dead building. This is just a building in like I've always told people, that was the victim of seeing the sports equations, the business of sports, their business models change over the years. And it was, and the Dome is a place that actually brought forth all the wonderful amenities that we see today in stadiums with, these luxurious clubs and suites and luxurious seating and the fine dining and the entertainment that you get in the ballpark, all started with the Astrodome. So, I think people get it when they go back in, but there's a disconnect there. And plus, we've also gone to the 22 years since the Astros played there. And so you have, there's a new generation of Houstonians here who do have a disconnect, and there's a younger generation that was probably born around 2000 or 1998 and never saw baseball there, and they've grown up with baseball in Minute Maid Park. So, we want to make this not just about nostalgia, but we want to bring forth a building that everybody can be proud of. I think that one of the things that Houston has, and you go online and see the different social media accounts and companies that that are out there, there's a lot of Houston pride in the culture in the city. And this is probably the epicenter of Houston culture. I mean, this is what changed Houston culture for decades after it was built. So it's kind of hidden away, but we have to just kind of tool with it and redesign it and make it something great again.
Can you wait too long? I mean, you said 22 years. I know they've done some stuff with it. I mean, how far can we wait till something gets done? Because I think it's great that it's got all this historical stuff that's tied to it, but it just sounds like a lot of people that need to agree on stuff, and I know that's hard to do.
Yeah.
So I mean, are we urgent? Where are we at?
I think we've been urgent for a number of years because we're really wasting time in the fact that the building is still in great condition. It's not falling apart, right? It's actually more structurally sound than NRG Stadium right next door. It was over-engineered. I mean, this building is very strong. It's in great condition, right? But what we really need to do, and kind of what you alluded to there, is getting some people to agree. And what I mean by that is we need our county government leadership to really get behind this and realize that this is an asset for the people of Harris County, Houston, and the surrounding areas where people are going to come in and spend money here. And so this is an opportunity for some people to really learn more. And I like what I just alluded to, since nothing has taken place there for a couple of decades, we have some people who are in government leadership who do have a disconnect about the Astrodome, and they kind of put it on the back burner and they don't know much about it, and there's always something else better, whether it's flood control or COVID-19 to discuss, and put on the front burner. But you know what? I don't think there's ever a really good time to do projects like this. It's kind of like your house. You know, if you need to replace the air conditioner in your house, or you need to put new carpeting, or, you know, if you have a pipe burst because it's cold outside and it's just, you know, rare freeze, there's never a good time to take on a project like this, but you have to do it because this is who we are. This is Houston, Texas. This is a city where we've done great things, where we've had innovation here. It is kind of in our DNA to think this way, and we need people who are in Houston to get on board with that. You know, I kind of joked. I said, "Do I need to run for, you know, some sort of political position? You know, to where you know, now I have
that may
the
help.
perspective. You know, you know, now I'm the county judge or mayor or whatever. And the mayor doesn't really have any real say into the Astrodome because it's county owned. But you know, I've kind of half joked about that, and so that's what we really need. Is we need to educate not only the public, but we need to educate some of the elected officials who are representing, you know, people like us, like me here in Harris County, you know, and the dome is owned by the citizens of Harris County. And so we're doing a disservice to people by not having it open and better than what it is.
Sure. And what I was going to say is it's going to take someone like you or a me or a Steve who grew up here and has that kind of connection to the Astrodome. Like you, we could all talk about it for a long time. We have a lot of memories, but it's somebody where that, like you said, it's our identity. And I've moved to other places, but Houston has always been my home. And I know plenty of other Houstonians that have felt that way. And like you said, we're doing the citizens of Harris County a disservice by just letting it waste away. And it's going to take somebody getting into the right position. And maybe it could be you, Mike. You know, I'll vote for you.
I appreciate that. And, you know, and you know what, I've always thought that, you know, I've actually considered it, you know, like what it would be to be an elected official, because working for a baseball team in the manner that I was able to, you really engage the public a lot. You know, the industry of sports and entertainment, but you really, one of the key things that I really took from over those 2 decades was engaging with people and hearing their stories and hearing how they feel and helping them out, you know, because I was helping people out from resolving issues. You know, I was in the ticket office for a while, you know, I mean, it was everything, anything. Baseball draws a lot of emotions, just like real life does. And, you know, I felt that, you know, this could translate into, you know, how we genuinely take care of citizens, you know, for a town or a city. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, politics in general, you know, politics hasn't gotten the vibe that it does, you know, without certain things that you think of. But, you know, it's, you know, politicians are humans too, you know, so they don't always make the best decisions. And, but, you know, yeah, I mean, it's I half joke, you know, like I said, I half joke, but I've come to the point where I kind of feel that it does require somebody who is willing to take on a project and be a leader. You know, when you are addressing other front burner, I understand that there are front burner issues, and those front burner issues are kind of in fluctuation. They change because, you know, you cannot predict when a hurricane is going to strike. You cannot predict when a pandemic is going to happen or some sort of national tragedy that's going to affect your area. But there are all these other projects. It's never a good time. It will never be a good time to do lots of different things. So you have to really grab it by the horns, take it on, get the knowledge, and organize it and see it through. And that's what Houston has always done. So that's what Houston has to do again. And I want to see more of in this region. You know, again, there's a lot of people who have a lot of Houston pride in the culture, H-Town, the HTX, you know, there's all these different terms that have come out with younger generations. And you see that there is a fire burning within them, and they would just absolutely love to see a facility like the Astrodome come alive. I mean, it would just be amazing. I mean, I wish you could take a holographic image out of my mind and you know, kind of put it here beyond these models that I have here and see what can actually be done. I mean, there is a definite vision.
Yeah, I don't know what your vision is formally. It sounds like some good stuff. I mean, what about all the people from California? I mean, would a production, what if Warner Brothers wants to drop shop there? I mean, it seems like that would be a pretty good facility, but again, I don't know.
It would be. You have to understand that, so in redesigning the Astrodome, you have to look back on how the Astrodome was designed. The Astrodome was designed to accommodate many multi-purpose events, right? And it was within this fantastic architectural and engineering wonder. And what made it spectacular were all these people that came together, the best in their fields, to do these things inside the Astrodome, whether it was a rodeo cowboy, a football player, a baseball player, an astronaut, a singer, whatever it was. Even a stuntman that came in there, or whatever it was. It was.
They
It
did
was an
see Evil
arena.
Knievel there, didn't he? Evil Knievel
Yeah,
did some stuff there.
that's right. That's right. It was a venue. It's a forum. It's a facility to bring out the best that we have in every industry across this country and in the world. Right. So, the thing about it is that you have to maintain that. You don't really want to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but you're not necessarily needing the stadium features anymore like you once did, because we have a stadium downtown at Minute Maid Park, and we have the football stadium next door for the NFL team. So, but what you don't want to do is you don't want to put a big water slide in the dome and say, hey, this is the Astrodom's going to be a water park for the next 50 years, because you cannot guarantee that business model is going to succeed even 5 years from now. Or if you put a ski slope in there or something like that, you have to make the Astrodome interchangeable. It has to be what I like to term flexible architecture, dynamic. It has to be dynamic. It has to be receptive to things. So if Warner Brothers wanted to come into the Astrodome, and it's happened before. Warner Brothers filmed inside the Spruce Goose Dome out in California when they were filming Batman Forever, because they needed a huge soundstage. You can do that in the Astrodome. There are spaces, if you want to rent out, you can do that. And under the things that I'm working on, you have gone from, I think people also think about the floor space of the dome, and they think about the football field, they think about the baseball field. But imagine the floor space being over 50 to 60% larger. A baseball field is about a little over 2.25 acres of land. Imagine removing the field boxes and creating a larger circle that's there on that floor.
Oh, wow.
And now you have a bigger space to do a lot of great things there. And it's not just that space, it's the surrounding areas too. You don't think about, at one point, if you're up on the loge level and you're sitting in the purple or gray seats, depending on what year it was.
The loge, the mezzanine was always my good.
You have some communications, some places where you can do other things in as well. Again, I don't want to go into too many details because there's a lot of stuff that's going on with this, but but you can make the Astrodome friendly to bringing in these types of things that you see as an event, things that you don't see going on behind the scenes. So it's
you can for sure say it's not a parking lot, though. It's definitely not going to be a parking lot.
I don't think so. No. No, and I think they
we've heard anything tonight.
They had proposed putting like 1,400 parking spaces under street level floor. I think we can do other things with that space that are a lot more interactive. But I will say that I do think that area is conducive to some VIP parking, and for very specific reasons for things that go on in the Astrodome and under this new design that I've been working on for a while. So, it's again, I think we can create, it's a wonderful opportunity to be very creative, and all the technology that we have now, all the interactivity that we have between people on social media and all these apps that we have, there's a wonderful opportunity to educate, to entertain, and to bring pride, back to this building and bring a new generation of people who will develop a pride for this building. Because I also have told people, when we renovate the Astrodome held baseball for 35 seasons, right? So, now it's been, the dome is over 55 years old. It turned 56 this year. Going into the future, it's still solid enough to last another 50 years. It's going to be this next incarnation for a lot longer than it was a baseball stadium and a football stadium. And I wouldn't, one thing I do want to say that I'm kind of excited about is I don't feel that baseball is completely out of the possibility in the Astrodome in the future. And I think, and now I'm not saying it from a major league standpoint, but think about how we develop young baseball fans in Houston. And, think about the Bad News Bears and kind of the kids on the field. Imagine a forum, an arena where many different kids can come in and we can have a new form of AstroTurf in certain areas. And you can have tournaments under the dome. And you can have many games. The floor would be large enough to have more than 2 or 3 or, up to 4 games on the floor. So it's you would still have some aspect of sports in there, but it would be largely entertainment and interactivity and a revenue. Again, we have to find a way. Well, we have to generate revenue there, just like the other buildings do for NRG Park, like the NRG Center, NRG Stadium, and NRG Arena. The dome has to generate revenue.
Yeah, it can't just sit there, even though we would be okay with that, but. Yeah, you're right. You have to kind of monetize it. And that's such a great idea. I mean, think about, I always thought it would be cool if they could do it to have they do the College Classic every February, March or so at Minute Maid, to have that in the dome. Man, that would be awesome. Just anything like that. Just like you said, not full-time or major league baseball use, but special tournaments or, area code games for prospects, things like that. That's all such a great thing that I would still give me a reason to go watch baseball in the Astrodome. I'll go.
Yeah, and I think now the College Classic that takes place at Minute Maid Park is it's a foundation revenue center, for the Astros and Minute Maid, and so that is tied to something specific, a charitable revenue stream. But that's not to say that we couldn't create something like that in the Astrodome. And one of the things that really I kind of love about the future is that telescoping stands, telescoping seating. We had movable stands, with the field box level at the Astrodome to convert from baseball to football. But if you look at some of the technology and some of the advancements that have taken place, in particular, if you look at some of the Japanese dome stadiums, and some just in general, some of the new technology with telescoping stands where you can still have really nice, you kind of think of seats that retract and fold away. It's kind of like, a bleacher, a plastic chair. But there are capabilities out there to have seats that are just as comfortable or more comfortable than the theater type seats that were in the Astrodome, and have that for other events. So that is what I kind of mean by having flexible architecture and having a dynamic space that can be interchangeable, to accommodate different things. And I'm not talking about, when I say different events, I'm not talking about just a convention center. I'm talking about a very dynamic facility that kids, schools will come out for tours, for education. I mean, there would be things going on in the building on different levels at all times.
Wow. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of stuff going on ahead of time there.
We just need to raise some funds. We just need to get the funds together. And so if I could take control of the county budget, then maybe I can start allocating
there you go.
Some money.
It all comes back to money.
It does, yeah, unfortunately.
It always does.
Oh, man.
Awesome. So we're kind of coming up on the hour, but I did want to ask, we've been listening to you, and you've got definitely a lot of heart. What does Houston mean to you when you think about Houston?
Houston is a very, I've used the word dynamic a lot tonight because I feel a lot of the energy of the city has come out of the spirit that generated a building like the Astrodome, the can-do spirit, the pride, that we're willing to do things different. We're willing to do the unknown, to go into the unknown and experiment and try to make things better, or try to be an innovator in a field. We also pride ourselves on many different aspects. So Houston is a town that developed in industry and in money, with energy and the medical fields and everything else. But Houston is also a very great arts center, and prides itself in having a lot of numerous artists who are very outstanding, and the art scene is very good. So we have a lot of creative minds here in Houston, and it just feels like in 1986. We had I think, I'm not sure who came up with it, but the city hall was pushing it, and it was called Houston Proud. And that's kind of something that it happened in a year where the economy was down. A lot of people
Right.
were unemployed at that time, and they were generating a slogan called Houston Proud, and a lot of people rallied around that. And you still kind of see it out there. Some of these bumper stickers that are out there and other things. And if you look up on YouTube, you can find some of these old videos. But Houston is very different. It's just like the weather here. Houston can be sunny in the morning and storming in the afternoon. It can handle that.
Yeah.
It takes perseverance to kind of really put Houston down, off of where it stands, because the people are very resilient here. And I think that the fact that we do have a lot of people who were born in Houston, native Houstonians, but we have a lot of wonderful people who have moved here from other cities and have really been part of the culture and really grasp it. And they find themselves as Houstonians and Texans here, and they're proud of this area. And I think pride, is a very big part of being a Houstonian, and culture.
Yeah.
The Houston culture scene, I think, has developed a
Oh,
lot,
most definitely.
especially over the past 10 years. I think it's kind of found its identity a lot more. And it's probably because of the social media that has become prevalent, and you can interact with many different people. But I think it's found a little bit more of an identity in the past several years now.
Yeah, you had mentioned about there was something called Rendezvous or something, and it kind of harkens and kind of wraps it all kind of back up for me, at least in the sense that sports do mean something to a city, and we've definitely as Houstonians rallied around the old Houston Oilers with Bum Phillips, and you had mentioned the Rendezvous. Can you
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit, or?
Sure. Yeah. So Houstonians, a lot of Houstonians are going to remember an event called Rendezvous Houston, which happened on April 5th, 1986. And it was to celebrate the 25th anniversary of NASA, and also the sesquicentennial, the 150th anniversary of Houston and Texas.
Wow.
And there was a French composer, electronic composer named Jean-Michel Jarre, who was brought to town in 1985 to see if he was interested in doing a massive concert, which involved the downtown skyline and putting lasers and projections on the buildings and illuminating them in colors that were changing and such. And he came to town and he saw the Houston skyline. It looked a lot like it does now. There's a few more buildings now, but a lot of the main buildings that you see now were there in 1986. And he just fell in love with the architecture and the spirit of Houston. He had never been to Texas before, and he befriended some
What?
astronauts. Yeah, he'd never been to Texas, and he became friends with, he visited NASA because this was something that was going to celebrate the anniversary of NASA. And, he became really good friends with Ronald Mcnair, who was a musician
Challenger.
as well. Yeah, and he was going to play the saxophone in space, and was going to put it on this new album called Rendezvous. And Rendezvous was designed for the concert that was going to be played in Houston. And that album was slated to be released right before the concert in April of '86. But Ronald Mcnair was also one of the Challenger astronauts, and he perished on January 28th of
Yes.
'86.
Yes. Sad
And
day.
so they weren't able to complete that project. So they had, when they did do the concert, they had a local artist, a musician, another saxophonist named Kirk Whalum, and he was big on the music scene. A lot of people knew him. He stepped in and played the saxophone part for McNair during the concert. They did a big tribute. They put the images of the astronauts on the buildings. But the concert as a whole was just, I kind of tend to feel that only Houston could have hosted an event like that. I mean, it was
Yeah.
really something. It was like a moving painting, like something that was changing. You would see, a longhorn steer on a building, the Texas flag, the Alamo, the NASA logo, people walking down the street. It was so creative. And you had these beams of light coming out of the buildings and fireworks, and buildings were changing from red to blue, and it was just, lasers were popping everywhere. And it was 90 minutes long. We're not talking about like some Fourth of July
Wow.
celebration. We're
Wow.
talking about a full concert, where he performed like 15 or 16 songs, and then he actually did an encore as well. And so it was something. My family, we went to go see it. We were at White Oak, right along White Oak Bayou, at Studiowood Park, and we watched it there. We had it. They simulcasted the music, the live music that was being performed live on a stage in front of one of the hotels downtown, and we could hear it as if we were right there close. And they had told people that if you are in the surrounding areas, especially on the west side, and if you bring your radio, like a boom box, you would be able to really see the big picture of this concert. And that event, I think, really kind of brought the city together at a time, like I said, where the economy was in the dumps. A lot of people were out of work. There were not a lot of real reasons to be happy, even though the sports scene was pretty good that year because the Astros played well, the Rockets played well that year, even though there was some heartbreak there, like we were accustomed to for many
Always.
years.
Always.
But Rendezvous Houston, it was called a City in Concert, was just something very spectacular. It changed my perspective of creativity and art forever, and still today, where I actually paint digitally images of the downtown buildings, like creating my own concert as part of my own art series. And I actually called Digital Rendezvous because it's kind of an homage to what Jean-Michel Jarre did, but it's done in digital form. And what I'd like to do is eventually create an animated concert where I have special effects that are all digital, and you can see a concert, if it's 30 minutes or an hour, and do that. So, but that was
Wow.
probably one of the most historic events that ever happened in Houston. And I wish many more people. There were like 1.3 million people that saw it in
Holy
person,
cow.
and the traffic was terrible. The freeways were locked up afterwards. But you know what? No one seemed to care. No
Yeah,
one seemed
right?
to care because it brought such a breath of fresh air into the city, and it just rejuvenated a lot of people's outlook. That people were just amazed by what they saw, and even if they were stuck in traffic trying to go home for a few hours, you go back and look at the stories. Houston police did not have any type of altercations or incidents
Wow.
from that show. I mean, that was really something that was very positive.
Well, it sure sounds like where we're at right now. We could certainly, if anybody's listening, try to plan another one of those rendezvous for 2021 and try to reunite and reinvigorate the city. So,
Yeah, Mike, I just have one last question for you, and just again for giving us some of your time tonight. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I've been following you for years. But Mike, what is your most, I don't know if favorite is the word, but your favorite Astrodome memory? Doesn't have to be Astros, can be Astros, but I know that you probably saw plenty of other things, rodeos, all that. What's one of your favorite or your all-time favorite memory that you experienced in the Astrodome?
Um, I would have to say the day that we closed out the Astrodome on October 3rd, 1999. I was working for the Astros. I see all of those ceremonies that had been planned out from the Astros radio booth, and seeing that perspective was really something. And because I had met the Roy Hoffines family, the Ari Bob Smith family early on. Before that game, Craig Cullinan was there, and all of these great Astro players that were there on the club level, and they were all going to be down on the field before the game. And my family was there. I didn't. My wife was she was just a couple of months pregnant with our first kid at that point, but she was there along with my parents, and it was great because my mom and dad were there because they were the ones who took me to the games. And now here I was literally sitting right there where Milo Hamilton sits, because that's where I was working, and watching, these wonderful closing ceremonies take place. And then the fireworks that, they turned out the lights, and Willie Nelson was singing "Turn Out the Lights" from behind second base. And it was just a really special moment. And I remember thinking at that time, why are we changing this? I mean, why are we doing this? And I did understand. I understood. Yeah. But at the same time, I was still asking, is this really the right thing? And again, that was just somebody who had an attachment to the Dome and a native Houstonian. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one at the time thinking that. But that day really stands out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I even as an adult, I feel the same way. I was in, what was it, 99 you said? I was 12, so I didn't really understand as much as I do now. But now as an adult, I feel like we could have waited a few more years and at least had a World Series in that building or something, 05, something like that. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great memory. I'm sure seeing all those legends and just watching everything kind of come to an end, a place that you kind of grew up with, that was so special to you. And obviously the way you talk about it now, you can tell that the Astrodome and Houston in general mean a lot to you. And as they do most of us native Houstonians. But I Steve, I just, and Mike for sure, thanks again, because I don't think we could have brought a better guest on to kind of capture the spirit of Houston and how it's important. And you're such a great ambassador for not only the Astros, but the Astrodome and our city. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on. And Steve, thanks for doing the legwork there. But it's just, you're such a great person to talk to about this city and in general. And I couldn't not thank you enough for taking some time today for us.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, I think that's a great place to end it, and I'm going to be looking and definitely looking down ballot, making sure when I see your name there for City Council.
Harris County Judge.
Harris County Judge. All right, look out, Hidalgo. But yeah, no, appreciate all of the history, and we didn't even fully tap into a lot of the memorabilia and stuff. You were gracious enough to show us some of that stuff there.
We can do it again. Do you want to see a piece that I have here?
Yes.
That I think is really cool.
Offhand.
Yeah, look, let me show you this. Can you see those?
Oh, are those Judge Hoffines glasses?
That is a pair of Judge Roy Hoffines' glasses.
Oh,
and,
nice. Go West.
And they're kind of a sense of inspiration. And if you look over my shoulder right over here, there's a jacket sitting there in that orange jacket. That is actually Judge Hoffines' jacket that he had in the early 70s. Yeah. And I got those on an auction. And they mean a lot to me, more than just having as memorabilia or, whatever it's termed. They really are a source of inspiration because, as I do all this work, whether it's for the Astros, it's for the Astrodome Conservancy, or if it's just me on my own, I like to think that I'm steering in the right direction for everybody, for the people of the city and the county, people who came before me, and just trying to do things the right way. So that's why I have those things.
Nice. Well, those glasses, that's really unique because I can't imagine how difficult that was to find. But his glasses are really iconic, so
Yeah.
it's so really cool that you have
Yeah.
those.
Yeah. They're very cool.
Yeah, that's one of the more cooler pieces I've seen. So.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well,
Well, again, thank you so much, Mike. Totally appreciate it.
thank you.
Continued positivity for everything that you're doing. Glad all is well.
Sure.
And yeah, definitely. I mean, you can look around this thing. I mean, it's like the usual suspects here. It's like, I feel like Kevin Spacey's character, just like all the stories that are sitting behind you there. And so, yeah, but I'm excited to hopefully, yeah, we can do what you were saying in regards to the rendezvous and try to gather the city around a concert, to gather the city back around the Astrodome as well, because I've heard from many people, and yourself included, that it's definitely worth keeping. I wasn't always a believer, but I definitely I get it now, and I'm
Good.
hopeful that yeah, that
He did his job.
that things are going to happen. So awesome. So thanks everybody. Thanks again, Mike. We'll talk soon, and also thanks again, Wes. Appreciate your time.
Thank
And
you.
we will go ahead and cash it on out there. Take care, Mike.
Thanks.
Thank
again,
you.
Mike. Really appreciate
Have a
it.
great night. Thank
You
you.
too. Thank you so much.